Nobody wanted this Persian cat. She was left outside a grieving old man's door, and he tried everything to get rid of her. But what she did 8 months later at 3:22 a.m. on a night Frank Kowalski was completely alone is something his daughter still can't talk about without her voice breaking. Frank Kowalski had lived alone for 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. He knew the exact number because he had stopped counting after the first year and then started again without meaning to, the way you notice a clock you thought you'd stopped hearing. His wife, Ruth, had dyed her hair. That was the plan. A Tuesday afternoon, a salon 3 blocks away. She never made it home. A driver ran a red light on Maple and Dexter, and the rest of Frank's life became something he hadn't agreed to. He was 68 years old. He had a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a building where nobody knew his last name. He had a daughter named Dana who called on Sundays and visited twice a year and always left looking like she was trying not to cry. He had a routine: coffee at 6:15, newspaper he didn't really read, a walk to the park at 10, lunch alone, television he didn't really watch, and a silence that had weight to it, the specific, suffocating weight of a life built for 2, now carrying 1. Frank did not have a cat until the morning he opened his front door and found one sitting on his welcome mat like she owned it. She was Persian, clearly, that explosion of cream-colored fur, that flat face carrying the permanent expression of someone who had just received deeply disappointing news. Small but dense, like a throw pillow that had developed opinions. No collar, no tag, just a cat on his mat at 6:18 in the morning, staring at him with the kind of confidence that made Frank feel like he was the one who had shown up unannounced. "No," Frank said. The cat blinked. Frank closed the door. When he opened it again 20 minutes later, she was still there. He spent the next 3 days doing everything right. He knocked on every door on his floor, he called the building manager, he put up a notice in the lobby with a description: cream Persian, flat face, appears to be judging everyone. He called the city's animal services line and was put on hold for 47 minutes before giving up. He left food outside, just to stop her crying, not out of kindness, and told himself firmly that this was temporary. Her name, he decided, was not my problem. She decided her name was Biscuit, or something like it, something settled and permanent, the way she had settled permanently in the corner of his living room behind the radiator where it was warm, and where Frank had to admit privately that he had started leaving a small folded towel, just so she wasn't cold, not because he cared. The first month was a negotiation neither of them acknowledged. Biscuit did not ask for affection. She didn't follow Frank around or cry for attention or do any of the things he'd been bracing for. She simply existed in his space with a kind of sovereign confidence, sleeping in the chair he'd stopped sitting in, watching the window he forgot to open, occupying the left side of the couch where Ruth used to sit with such natural authority that Frank sometimes walked into the room and felt like, for one disorienting half-second, like someone was home. He did not examine this feeling closely. What he did examine with great irritation was the cat hair. It was everywhere, on his dark trousers, in his coffee once, on the bathroom floor in quantities that suggested Biscuit was shedding an entire second cat per week. Frank complained about this to no one because there was no one to complain to, which had been the situation for 2 years, 4 months, and he'd stopped counting again. By the second month, he had stopped trying to find her another home. By the third, he'd bought her better food, the expensive kind with the green label. For her digestion, he told himself, not because she'd looked at the previous brand with an expression of such profound offense that he'd actually apologized out loud. He did not tell Dana about the cat. Dana arrived on a Saturday morning in March, her 18-month-old son Noah balanced on her hip and a casserole dish in her other hand, and the particular expression she always wore when she was preparing to worry about her father. She saw Biscuit immediately. Biscuit saw Noah immediately. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds and changed the geometry of everyone in the room. Noah, who had been clinging to Dana's hip with both arms, spotted the cream-colored fur across the room and went completely rigid with the electric full-body excitement that only very small children and very good dogs can produce. His arms shot out. He made a sound that wasn't quite a word. He lunged. Dana grabbed him. "Careful, we don't know if she's..." But Biscuit was already walking towards him, not running, not retreating, walking with that unhurried, deliberate confidence she brought to everything, straight across the living room floor, directly to the small boy straining towards him from his mother's arms, and she stopped right in front of him and looked up at his face with an expression that Frank had never seen her before. Not disdain, not indifference, something that looked, in the morning light of his living room, almost like recognition. Noah reached out his small hand, touched her fur with 2 fingers, and laughed, that total, helpless, whole-body baby laugh that makes everyone in the room feel for a moment that everything is going to be fine. Biscuit pressed her nose against his palm and closed her eyes. I see you still haven't subscribed. That actually breaks my heart a little. Hit the button right now, because what this cat does next, you need to witness. Dana stayed longer than she'd planned. She watched her son toddle around her father's apartment with Biscuit 3 feet behind him, not rushing, not interfering, just there. When Noah sat on the floor, Biscuit sat beside him. When Noah reached for something he shouldn't, Biscuit was somehow already between him and the sharp corner of the coffee table, a soft, immovable wall of fur and intention. "Dad," Dana said quietly, "how long has she been here?" "Few months," Frank said into his coffee. "She's good with him. She's a cat." Dana looked at her father for a long moment, at the folded towel by the radiator, at the expensive green label food on the counter, at the way Frank watched Biscuit with Noah, that careful, sideways attention he thought he was hiding. She didn't say anything else, but when she left that evening, she hugged him longer than usual. Not happiness, exactly, but something adjacent to it, a texture to the days that hadn't been there before. Biscuit was on the couch when he woke up, in the kitchen when he made coffee, on the windowsill in the late afternoon when the light came in low and gold, her fur catching it in a way that made the room look different. He talked to her sometimes, just occasionally, the way you narrate things when someone else is in the room, going to the pharmacy, or rain again, or once, on a gray November Tuesday, "She would have liked you, Ruth. She always wanted a cat." Biscuit looked at him from the windowsill with that flat, ancient face. Then she crossed the room and sat directly beside him on the couch, closer than she'd ever sat before. Frank looked at the wall for a while. "Don't make it weird," he said. Biscuit put her head on his knee. He left his hand there, next to her, for a long time, not petting her, just there. The weeks that followed had their own quiet rhythm. Frank started noticing things he hadn't let himself notice before. The way Biscuit always chose the left side of the couch, Ruth's side, without ever being told. The way she waited by the front door at exactly 10 in the morning and was in the exact same spot when he came back, every single day. Frank started coming home a little faster without quite knowing why. He stopped eating lunch standing over the sink. He set the table instead, just one place, but properly, because Biscuit would jump onto the chair across from him and sit there with such dignified expectation that eating hunched over the counter suddenly felt like an embarrassment. He called Dana one Sunday and talked for 40 minutes. She asked if something had happened. "Nothing happened, everything's fine," and meant it. Some stories build to their moment slowly. This one had been building for 8 months. It arrived on a Tuesday night in November, 3:22 a.m. Frank had gone to bed at 10, like he always did. The apartment was dark and quiet. And then, not gradually, not gently, Biscuit started making a sound. Not her normal sounds, not the soft chirp she made at the window, not the low rumble of her breathing when she slept. This was different, insistent and high, and wrong in a way that reached through sleep and grabbed. Frank opened his eyes. Biscuit was standing on his chest, all 9 pounds of her directly on his sternum, staring at his face with an intensity that was nothing like her usual sovereign disinterest. He tried to sit up. That's when he felt the pressure in his chest, the wrong kind, heavy, radiating, the kind his doctor had described once in clinical language Frank had filed away and tried not to think about. His left arm felt distant. His vision had an edge to it. He reached for the phone on his nightstand. His hand was shaking. He called Dana first, not 911, Dana, because that's what people do at 3:22 in the morning when they are 68 and alone and frightened. And Dana answered on the second ring because she had never fully stopped listening for his calls, and she heard his voice and said, "Dad, I'm calling 911. Don't hang up." And she did not hang up. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. Later, after the hospital, after the stent, after Dana had sat in the vinyl chair beside him for 3 days running, the cardiologist explained what would have happened if Frank had slept through it, if another 30–40 minutes had passed. He used careful language, medical language. What it meant was he would not have woken up at all. Frank came home on a Thursday. Biscuit was on the welcome mat, his welcome mat, inside, just on the other side of the door, as if she had positioned herself at the exact point closest to where he would come back from. She looked back at him with that flat, cream-colored, deeply unimpressed face, the face he said no to and closed the door on and spent 3 days trying to rehome. He sat down on the floor, right there in the doorway at 68 years old, and Biscuit walked forward and put her head against his chest, carefully, precisely, right where the pressure had been, and stayed there. He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Dana, standing behind him in the hallway with his hospital bag, put her hand over her mouth. Frank Kowalski had lived alone for 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days. He hadn't been alone for 8 months. He just hadn't known what to call it. Sometimes the things we almost turn away from are the things that save us, not because they're perfect, not because they asked to be chosen, but because they stayed, through the indifference, through the silence, through every morning you forgot to say thank you. Biscuit stayed, a 9-pound Persian cat with a face full of opinions and fur that got in everything, who arrived uninvited on a welcome mat and never really left, and who was awake at 3:22 a.m. on a November night when everything depended on it. Have you ever almost missed something that ended up saving you? Tell me in the comments, or answer this. Do you think animals know more than we give them credit for, or was this just instinct? I want to hear what you think.